Hello everyone. Okay, I hope we're all well and happy. This is the last YouTube lesson for a week because next week would have been half term. So the work I set now today needs to be done basically from Monday the 1st of June. And either on that Monday or Tuesday I'll do the next bit. We haven't got that much more to do on the executive. We're a good way through. And I feel like I should take you an essay, but I think I might leave it until after half term and do a nice essay around about then. Okay then, so last lesson I left you to watch some episodes of Cabinet Confidential. You had a nice table to fill in as well about what affects the relationship between the Cabinet and the Prime Minister, and all this stuff having to think about, is the Prime Minister the most dominant person of their Cabinet? And should they be the most dominant person, or is the Cabinet important? You could get exam questions around this. You validate the view that the cabinet no longer plays an important role in UK politics, or you validate the view that the Prime Minister increasingly dominates their cabinet, something of that nature. So you need to think about what kind of points you put to say, yes, the cabinet is really important, still plays an important role, or points to say, actually, the cabinet isn't really all that important anymore. The Prime Minister does tend to dominate. You also need a number of examples as well, and think those cabinet confidentials should have given you lots of examples. So you had on there, for example, in times of crisis, sometimes a cabinet can be really important in helping. Oh, sorry, that's Zengi. Can be really important. Yeah, it's Zengi. Hello, Zengi. Can be really important in terms of trying to resolve it. So James Callaghan in the mid 1970s. Oh, hello. With the IMF crisis, really used his cabinet. Mrs. Thatcher, though, and Tony Blair, as we know, tend to use their cabinet a lot less. Isn't that right, Thingy? Yes. Okay, they were much more dominant. So the role of the Prime Minister and the cabinet differs from Prime Minister to Prime Minister and circumstances. I think, like I said last time, David Cameron had to use his cabinet because of those Liberal Democrats in coalition. So the table, Zengi, I'm trying to speak to the students. Yeah, that's coffee, don't like coffee. You had to fill in that table, didn't you, about the factors that influence the relationship between the Prime Minister and the Cabinet. You realise I'm not going to listen to a word I'm saying because I'm talking. Right. You go down there. Find somewhere nice to go and sleep. Yes. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, this table. So there's a table here, isn't there, about the factors that influence the relationship between the Prime Minister and the Cabinet. And you had to use the Edexcel textbook, use some examples from the book, use some examples from the videos you've watched about the management skills of a Prime Minister, so just their personal style, the ability of the Prime Minister to set the agenda, popularity of the Prime Minister that wasn't in the textbook, but that can affect relationships with the Cabinet. Popular Prime Ministers, especially those who've been newly elected, often can be much more dominant over their Cabinet than those who are perhaps unpopular, coming out of their time, etc., etc. Cabinet committees and decision making. You saw from those videos how Tony Blair often liked to have meetings with just one or two cabinet members on his sofa, and it became known as sofa government. So it's an education matter. Rather than discuss it to the whole cabinet, it discussed the details with just the education secretary, setting some targets or whatever. And then at full cabinet, he'll point to say, I spoke to the education secretary and we agreed this. Do we all think that's the right way to go? Yes? Right, next item. So that became known as sofa government. A Prime Minister's office as well, so this idea that the Prime Minister is now, he hasn't got quite a department, but he is gaining advisors and stuff who help him kind of control cabinet members. You may have heard of Dominic Cummings, who's Boris Johnson's big cheese, seems to upset quite a lot of people. He kind of has that role. And then the impact of wider events. I mean, the Johnson government with this COVID-19 came out of the blue, didn't it? All prime ministers have to deal with crises that come out of the blue. That can affect relations with the cabinet, about how much they use the cabinets, etc., etc. So hopefully that all made sense. No one got back to me to say they were unsure, stuck, or whatever on that. So I'm assuming everyone was happy. Now, for now, we'll ignore this thing about presidentialism. It's Prime Minister presidential. I think with hindsight, I might change this next year in the booklet. I think we need to do the next bit about different prime ministers, and at the end, as a summary, go back about is the PM presidential. So ignore that for now. if you look at the exam specification at the front of the booklet, so I'm trying to find it, you'll notice under 3.3.2, 3.3.2, yeah, I said that right, it says you need to know the power of the Prime Minister and Cabinet to dictate events and determine policy. Students must study the influence of one Prime Minister from 1945 to 1997 and one post-1997 Prime Minister. This is regarding their relationship with the Cabinet. Okay, now that video has quite a few examples on there. We've got Blair examples, haven't we? It has examples from Mrs. Thatcher and John Major. You need to use, think about, Theresa May and others' resignations. So hopefully we've got stuff for that first bullet point. The second bullet point says students may choose, that should really say teachers will choose for them. Students may choose any pre-1997 and any post-1997 Prime Minister, provided that they study them in an equivalent level of detail, covering both events and policy, with examples that illustrate both control and lack of control. So in other words, you need to know in detail about one Prime Minister before 1997, about their ability to control events and not control events, their ability to dictate policies, get their agenda through or not, and also the relationship with the Cabinet and how they kind of operate, and you need to know about one post-1997 Prime Minister. Now, the two which I've chosen to do on your behalf is John Major, and my reasoning is that when we did about elections all those months ago, we did the 1992 election, and so it kind of makes sense to do the Prime Minister who was in power then and won that election. Okay, we had to do the 1997 general election, if you remember, so therefore it kind of makes sense to do Tony Blair. And also Major and Blair are two very different characters, so again you can see differences between the two and how they operated and how they determined events and stuff. Now we're going to do these two in detail. However, I think in essays they do like quite a lot of examples in essays, comparative examples. This was similar too. And like I said before with Parliament, some things kind of make natural pairings. So John Major, Gordon Brown and Theresa May, they kind of have some quite clear similarities in some ways. Tony Blair has quite a few similarities with Mrs. Thatcher in terms of style and working with Cabinet and stuff. So don't just be limited to John Major and Tony Blair. And in fact, I'm going to make you do at least one more post-1997 Prime Minister apart from Tony Blair. And you can choose one you want to do, whether it's Cameron, Brown or May. I don't think there's probably enough on Johnson just yet. I've also put on Teams a video about Harold Wilson back in the 1960s and 70s. Again, it's for those who are interested, who want to supplement examples. It's on there for you to watch. It's the documentary that was done when he died, the kind of like an obituary documentary on BBC One in 1996, I think it was. So again, there's some nice stuff on there which you can use. Also, if you want to look at the Thatcher stuff, because we did watch that video from Andrew Marr, didn't we, about Mrs. Thatcher. I haven't put it onto Teams actually, but I think it's being repeated on BBC at the moment. So it's probably on iPlayer. So again, if you want to remind yourself about Thatcherism, some stuff, then that's great. I think basically the more you can do, the better. But the two we're going to really concentrate on in detail is Major and Blair. But do look at other ones as well, because they will supplement your answers. So with that said, what you need to do, I know it's an A3 sheet, but obviously I can't do it as an A3 sheet, so I'm going to send you the A4 version of it out. On Teams, you'll notice for Tony Blair and John Major, for both of them, I've made like an information overview. I think it's the top thing on all the list of resources for each of those two Prime Ministers. And it's just kind of my summary of that Prime Minister and the things they kind of got up to. So you need to use that. There's a little series on YouTube called Reflections, like a little summary. It's about half an hour long. It's a summary of John Major. There's a summary of Tony Blair as well, and there's some questions in your booklet based on those two Prime Ministers. So I want you to watch that. And then, now this is not compulsory, although I would highly recommend it, especially I spent ages typing these questions out. There's a documentary I found on John Major. Now, unfortunately, they've only got the middle one. I can't find episode 1 and episode 3. But episode 2, which is about an hour long, it was made about 1999-ish, so 2 years after he left office. It covers the ERM disaster. It gets a little bit economic detail, which you kind of skirt over. And then it talks about some of his problems with Europe and Mrs. Thatcher and some of these Eurosceptic ministers. So there's quite a nice documentary about an hour long which covers those two areas. So I've made some questions on that. They're both on Teams. The link's on Teams and the questions are on Teams. So I really suggest that you watch that as well. Then fill in the A3 sheet with his strengths, his weaknesses, what he did, what he didn't do. So Real Shame episode 3 is not on there because I'm guessing that would then have dealt with the 97 election and James Bulger and all those other problems. But anyway. And then for Tony Blair, I've got the exact same things. However, there was a documentary series called The Rise and Fall of Tony Blair. Now, how should I put this? It was rather long. The first episode is an hour and a half long, and the second one is actually about 40 minutes. Again, I wouldn't watch it in one go. I did, and then I watched it again and did the questions. Again, it's really worth watching because it really goes into some of the ins and outs of Blair years, his relationships with various ministers, and there's some really good examples on there you can use. So, again, you've got all next week. It's 2 hours, 2.5 hours, whatever. I watch it in bits. You can think, I'll watch half an hour of it on Sunday afternoon, I'll watch another half hour of it whilst having my tea on Monday. I'd do it that way if I were you. Anyway, using all those resources and any own knowledge you have about Blair or John Major for that matter, fill in the sheet which I'm going to send out. Okay, and then finally, I left a blank kind of copy of the sheet, and you can choose any other Prime Minister you want. And I would suggest you do one after 1997, so either Gordon Brown, David Cameron or Theresa May. Now, I don't have a great deal of information in the same format on Theresa May because obviously she's only just left power and I've not had time to make any. You could say you've been off since February, Paul. I'm sure you've had time, but I haven't done. But you can find out stuff on Theresa May quite easily. If you want to do Theresa May, feel free. David Cameron, again, there's a reflections on David Cameron which is on Moodle. There's a Politics Review article about him as well, which is also, Teams, which is also on Teams. And again, I've not done a cover overview of him, but again, you can easily find out stuff about David Cameron. And there was a BBC documentary, I think it's on iPlayer, about Cameron called The Cameron Years or something. What I will do, I haven't done it yet, I might do it tonight after I've done my clapping. I'll write out the questions for it either tonight or tomorrow. I'll write out the questions for that documentary, and then if people want to watch it and answer questions on the documentary on David Cameron, then they can do. Gordon Brown, I've not done a cover sheet on him. There's reflections which I put on, and there was a Channel 4 documentary called Dispatches, but it's before he left office. It doesn't really cover the economic crash, but there is some stuff on there about Gordon Brown. So basically, use the A3 sheet I'm going to send out to you. Do John Major, so to speak. Do Tony Blair's. Do at least one other Prime Minister. Feel free to do others if you want to. Okay, if you're interested. And be thinking about for all of them, how does this show him or her dictating events, dictating policies, getting their agenda through, and why have they been successful in doing X and Y? What failures do we have from both or whichever Prime Minister we're looking at? And then really crucial to think about why. Why has John Major not been as successful as Tony Blair has at getting something through? And also for someone like Tony Blair, have a think about, did it change over time? Was Blair more successful earlier on than he was later on? And what happened in that time as to why he may have been more successful at the beginning of his term and end of his term? The same for Mrs. Thatcher and other Prime Ministers. So really have a think about these Prime Ministers, really get some detail down, and be thinking about examples for essays, how you can say that Prime Minister is a bit like that Prime Minister. So if you can do that for me over next week, and then on the 1st or 2nd of June, when we kind of come back from half term, if I can say that, we'll then spend a session just wrapping up the Prime Ministers, so to speak, get them all sorted, and then we need to start the last topic area. It's not a massive topic area, it's basically about the Supreme Court and about the European Union. So we'll do that when we come back, and that should then take us up to the summer jollies. Okay, any problems, send me an email. I'll send an email out and I'll get these things out to you all. And if I don't see you before, have a nice half term.